Hope you are all enjoying the conference and having fun learning, connecting with new people today. We have got two incredible guests here who have been working in this space for a really long time, even before physical AI became a buzzword. So, very excited to be on the panel today. I'm Shin, and I will be moderating the panel. But before we dive in, I want to take a moment to appreciate Ashish. He actually flew into the Bay Area this morning from Seattle. So let's give him a round of applause for being here with us. Yes. So, okay, so let's get started. Let's get started with a very quick round of introduction. Can you each share a little bit about yourself, your background, and then what company are you building right now?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you for inviting me. So we are General Robotics. And we had a great set of talks from Google and then from Chelsea. But if you think about the number of robots that are deployed out there, specifically doing any kind of AI workload, it's really, really tiny. And I'm not talking about cars. I'm talking about arms. I'm talking about, of course, humanoids. I'm talking about AMRs. I've spoken with hundreds of large enterprises who have already invested in arms, UR5E arms, or these quadrupeds, and now humanoids. But the number of robots that are showing up in deployment is really, really tiny part of it, right? In fact, if you look at the workloads such as RL or multimodal robotic models, there are 0 deployments out there. Unless these robots are making things easier for us, are being useful, we will always question the technology that's been invented, and that's the gap that we are trying to solve. The models, for instance, Chelsea and NVIDIA folks and other folks in academia that are building, we want them deployed on the robot, as of yesterday. And how can we do that, right? That's the problem we are solving. We are based out of Seattle. My background, PhD in robotics and machine learning from MIT long time ago, spent 17 years doing a number of technological innovations, incubations, and commercializations at Microsoft Research before I started this company in 2023, backed by E14. So very, very happy to be here.
Great. Chiu, would you share a little bit about yourself and your company as well?
Sure. I'm going to start.
And perhaps you can explain to them
Yeah, so my name is Chiu, and my Chinese name is Chi-Cho, balloon. So at a young age, actually, I was like a balloon because I traveled a lot between Asia and the US for education, learning Chinese and culture in Taiwan, as well as studying in the US. And I grew up in Wisconsin, majored in electrical computer engineering there. The reason I'm dressed up as Mario is he is a plumber, and he has a specialized skill. And the company I founded with my co-founders here actually tonight, we are building specialized skill sets for robots, and we are training robots those skills. And we'll explain more about that later. But before I founded this company, I was at Google for 23 years. And I was lucky enough to work with Larry and Sergey on the first Google robot. Does anybody know what robot that is? Anyone?
Take a guess.
It was called the Googlebot. And that is actually the crawler's name that goes around the internet to collect information from around the World Wide Web and index it and put it in the results today. I'm not related to Ed Chi, even though we have a similar name, but I also have a Ling Ziling story. So I bumped into her on a plane one time.
Wow.
And she wanted my seat, but I didn't give it to her. All right. So interesting enough, this is the Computer History Museum. And one of the Google products that is actually downstairs is something I actually built on my first day at Google. And so if you guys ever check it out later tonight or later after this show, you'll see that Google bot. Cool.
Very cool. And my first question here is physical AI. So early this year, NVIDIA's Jensen Huang actually came up with this term, physical AI, and said that it's going to be the next frontier of AI. And we all know that he's just trying to sell more GPUs. But physical AI has become like a buzzword, like you're seeing it everywhere, people talking about it. And I know that half of audience today might not be super familiar with this space. So I would love each one of you just to describe what exactly is physical AI, and then what does it mean, and also what has changed in the past few years that has enabled this wave, and then turn all the research project into something real for now.
You want to go first? Okay. So, I'd like to point out to some of the comments that Ed made in his talk. He said about the compute. I mean, in the last few years, we have really accelerated our compute. When you think about compute, it's the ability to manipulate bits and numbers, right? Now, physical AI is really about manipulation of atoms, right? It's the physical space that you're going to change. And if we think about the acceleration of what has happened with the compute, now imagine if you can do, these electrons and atoms you can manipulate right now at this level, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, right? If if you look at the same template, you're going to start accelerating with the physical AI as well, right? So in my mind, physical AI is our ability to manipulate these atoms in the world. And with robots, what's the biggest man-made structure on this planet? It's Great Wall of China, right? And if we have robots doing these things automatically for you, I'm sure we can create bigger structures. We can have a physical impact in this environment that has, that probably many of us have not even thought about. So to my end, right, physical AI is manipulating your atoms.
Yeah, physical AI to me is, it's like a whole different world. And the way I look at it is there's different layers of it. The first layer is hardware, the physical nature of it. So you see it. It's like the humanoids, the quadrupeds, the robot dogs. It could be other factors like sensors and cameras that play into the physical AI element. There's controls. Somebody mentioned about controls and trajectories of how arms swing. That is also a physical AI hardware element. Besides the hardware, there's also cars. I should mention, robo-taxis and Waymos are also in the hardware category. But besides that, there's another layer of intelligence, which is like the LLM models, the World Foundation models, as well as the safety aspect, which is you need human in a loop to kind of train the robot to make sure they are doing the right things. But also, you need to have guardrails to make sure the robots don't do anything to harm people or to harm property or other things in that path. What we're building is one of the pieces of skills and learning. And so that, I think, is also an area of physical AI because you have to train robots these skills, and they have to learn from something or someone. And lastly, in the future, if a person or a company manages many robots, they will need to manage that in a way that the robots can actually be able to interact with each other and not, act blind without any guidance.
Awesome. So next question, I have a question for Ashish. So Ashish, you mentioned that like you were at Microsoft for over 2 decades, and you were there leading robotic research, and you also built this airframe that lay out the foundation for the whole simulation community. And I'm curious, like what made you decide to like leave Microsoft in 2023 and to start General Robotics? I'm curious, like what opportunity did you see out there that you feel that Microsoft cannot just go after?
Yeah, I think I'm a sucker for pain, let me say this way. So robotics, one of my mentors said that unless you're crazy about it, it's not going to happen. Between, hardware, between capital, between the problem of physical words, friction and drag, and, between the fragmented ecosystem. So unless you are crazy about it and thinking about it all the time, you will always fall short, right? I was at Microsoft Research 17 years instead of, I didn't spend 2 decades. But it was very clear that in order to have, really experience the revolution and have the real world impact, I had to step out. The choice was between, again, being part of a big machinery that Microsoft is, and again, very, very smart people, very business savvy people. But with robotics, you got to go and live the pain. Unless you live the pain, you are not going to be able to solve the big problems. We have so many great minds working in this area, but still, I think that, there is the last delta, which I think is the highest friction, is actually deployment. Mm-hmm. I know some of the best roboticists in the world are field roboticists, right? Because they understand small nuances, when your sensors heats up, when your motors suddenly are actuating differently than the specs. And so you have to think and, really live that pain. And as I said, I'm a sucker for pain, right? But again, there is a need. We need more people folding the sleeves and jumping and working with real robots, as opposed to, of course, everyone has a place, but I think we need a lot more people working with real machines and real deployments.
Awesome. And I have a follow-up question here. Yeah. So I feel like General Robotics has evolved a lot since 2023. Like at first, you guys were really focusing on just simulation. But I feel like now it's like you guys focus more on deployment, first intelligence. So I'm just curious, like, what's the reason behind this decision? And then, like, why do you decide to move up to this operation layer? And, like, what do you think that was the, like, right decision to do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And this is like, as you build a startup, you start thinking about all of these issues. Yes, when we started, we thought, we will be a platform company. We'll provide simulations and tools that others can go and fine-tune, right? Because that's also a venture community wants, right? They want the venture community wants you to have a product that others can go. But I've been doing robotics for a couple of decades. Like if you have to guess the number of people who can, for instance, successfully fine-tune a foundation model for robotics for a form factor. Any guesses? Thousands, hundreds, dozens? My guess is less than 100 people worldwide right now, right? And same thing with RL. If you go and speak with any of these enterprises, that's what they want to do. We want to do RL, we want to fine-tune it. But then you go under the hood and see, neither they have expertise, neither they have the resources, and often these projects are PhD level projects, right? And forget to get to deployment. So yeah, so I can create this tooling and try to sell to the world, just to realize that there are so few people in the world who can effectively use it, right? Of course, we'll get to a stage where there will be hundreds and thousands of for instance, roboticists and machine learning folks who can use it. But the state right now is that no one, at least in the industry, is able to successfully take these models and deploy it. So yes, we started at simulation, but quickly realized that the need right now is deployment. When I go to a large auto manufacturer, they have already invested 50 million plus amounts on getting arms and quadrupeds and AMRs. And if you can make those robots useful now, that's the biggest value. So Chelsea mentioned that in order to be a roboticist, you have to go and become a company, right? And basically said, what's the biggest friction? The biggest friction is deployment. And can we accelerate that deployment? So we started at simulation, but now we deploy because that's where the greatest value is.
Yeah, and now you have this product called a Grilled platform that you can get like any robot running in just 15 minutes. That's kind of like very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, right? I want to show up at a customer's floor. Hopefully they already have the robots and get to value in 15 minutes. In robotics, that's a pipe dream. Usually these are months, if not years long POCs. Interestingly, there was an article, I mean, I mentioned a few of the folks here, that said that service integrators such as Accenture's and Booz Allen Hamilton, who are the ones who will go and create these robotic solutions, they are waiting to be Netflixed. You know how Blockbuster got Netflixed? And if you think about it, in Gen AI, in robotics, it's still quite a technological leap. There is not enough what I call forward deployed engineers in the field. So, so basically, that's pretty much our play. Like we have a very compelling infrastructure, which we call grid. And the goal is to go and create value as soon as possible, as opposed to, make it a consulting project that lasts several years, and then in the end get shelved because it's a POC. You don't want that.
Awesome. Okay, so turning to Chi. So you also have a very similar background, like you were at Google for 20 years, and then you also helped to build the first physical robot product there. So very curious, like you decided to leave Google this year and to start your own company. Congratulations, that's pretty exciting. So like, I'm curious, like what led you to make this decision? And maybe you can share a little bit more about like, I know you guys are working on this like specialized robot training, and basically like you're applying this one-shot learning that you show robot like one demo, and then the robot can just pick it up and do the same stuff. So like what we are actually seeing a lot of like excitement in this space right now. So curious about like what made you want to like jump into this space, and then like what's unique about like your approach right now?
Yeah, so I think my story is a bit complex. Yes. So, but I'll give a really simplified version of what motivated me. If you go down a 101 up and down from San Jose to San Francisco, back in the 70s and 60s and 50s, there was an aerospace industry that was basically the heart of Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley was called Silicon Valley. And I was a teenager a couple of years ago, and my uncle was giving me a tour of Silicon Valley. He was telling me all the history about Intel, AMD. That was like the whole foundation of the Silicon Valley. And then came the software, then came the internet, then came mobile, then came apps, then came now AI. And so when I joined Google, I was basically an engineer, but I had a very entrepreneurial heart. I wanted to create things, I want to build things, I want to put it out to market. And lucky enough, I was able to do a lot of 0 to 1 product development and taking it to market inside Google. So I was known as a serial entrepreneur. And Google gave me a lot of that, both resources and support for that. It's been 23 years, wow. And so I want to give back to Silicon Valley and the world, where I want to create more Googles, right? So I want to actually provide my experience and knowledge to do that. And I see physical AI as that next wave. And it's so raw and early right now. I know Ed Chi says we have probably 6 years to go to kind of seek peak. And it kind of shows how early we are in this stage. And so my expertise and background is basically creating partnerships and networks, right? And so if anybody here is like a fan of Back to the Future, if you ever like go back to the future a couple of times, you want to change the world. Well, I've seen many revolutions of technology change. Now I have an ability to help set a good path, especially with physical AI, and I'm basically trying to make sure I'm grounding that well so that we can develop together. And one of the things that Ashish and I were actually talking about earlier is physical AI, the space is so fragmented. Nobody talks to each other right now. And everybody's building their own stack. Everybody wants to be like their own thing. But as I said earlier, the space is so huge. There's so many opportunities for many people here who are worried about, software engineer doing one thing, and what do I do next? You can be a plumber, but you can also train or build data or do simulation for next generation plumbers, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity for us to transform ourselves to adapt to this change. And every evolution of technology adoption has this change effect. And so I want to be part of this and support this change for a larger community. And that's what CosmicBrain is also building, is we're basically building this platform to connect folks who are building different parts of this physical AI so that we can all work together to build something together. Thank you.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yes.
Is it better to be, try to be a plumber or try to be someone who can teleoperate a robot to be a plumber?
I don't think it's either. So I think it's better for a intelligence form to perform plumbing skills or duties or complete plumbing tasks. So it may not be teleoperated. They should be basically reasoning and thinking about, okay, this is a problem with the pipe. What kind of pipe is it?
No, I'm thinking about the 1X. I'm sure, if you have a robot in your home that's dexterous and flexible enough, someone else is plumbing for you remotely.
Oh.
Yeah, the recent news about 1X, offering a subscription service for robots to be in your home. I think, yes, I think they're starting as teleoperations to collect data, but I think in the future would be much more efficient for the machine to operate by itself.
Amazing. And I'm sure that our audience so far has gained pretty much good understanding of what you guys are building. But I'd love to provide more context to them. So can you each just share a customer story, a very concrete example that what will task that your client, they will automating with robot or what they are training robots to do. And also curious about how does it work out in the end economically? How does everything work out?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our customers is a large North American car manufacturer, right? And again, I distinguish between intelligence and skills. Skills, for instance, you guys are building skills, we do serve skills. But yes, you guys are building skills. And I mean, what's the difference in skills and intelligence? There are 8 billion people on this planet who are intelligent. Some are skillful to drive. And then even a tinier bit are skillful to, say, fly an airplane, for instance. So there is a difference between intelligence and skills. I want my robots to be skillful right now so that they can produce value. Sure, being intelligent is a good golden compass, but I do think that if you have skills And more importantly, general purpose skills, they can even be important. So I'll give you a specific example. You go and buy, say, a UR5E arm or a Franca arm. It already has the skill to pick and place any object in the world, right? So when it sees a can, it figures out, all right, this is how it needs to be, grasped. Not like this, for instance. And you can do it for every single object in the world. And you kind of also have the skill to place it appropriately. If it's on the table, you're not trying to put it here. You have the information about the affordances. So this general purpose skills, even imagine if I had an arm that has these general purpose skills, how useful it'll be. Out of the box, you can go and utilize this thing. So specifically coming back to the customer story, a lot of large manufacturers are trying to automate their manufacturing pipelines. Why? If you hear from the prevalent conversation that's happening in Silicon Valley, I don't know if you saw that A16Z presentation, and they are using the phrase, software is going to eat labor, and they make all these different claims. Basically, of course, there is a race towards automate your physical labor. That includes plumbing, that includes manufacturing, and if you're a large manufacturer, you have to get ahead of the curve. You need to start thinking about how do you not let other startups or other companies who are trying to automate manufacturing, basically eat your share. So in that case, generalized pick and place for manufacturing is amazing. These manufacturers have 1,000 different parts, steering wheels, car bags, carburetors, and these are these objects that have never been seen. Well, maybe, few of them might be seen by your general purpose computer vision models, right? So you need a generalized pick and place for all of these different kinds of objects. When we show up at many of these customers, they are trying to solve it. They're trying to do it with RL. They're trying to do it with foundation model fine-tuning. Some of them even a classical pipeline. They will try to go and buy certain solutions. But to Chi's point, it's all fragmented. If you're a large manufacturer, you need a sovereign robotics strategy. You do not need these piecemeal solutions that often a lot of robotics companies are solving, right? For them, they want something that can pick and place 1,000 different things, that can go into all kinds of nooks and corners in their 100-year-old factories that they have created. So there's a general purposeness of it. So that's where we come in and basically say that, all right, you have all of these legacy robots. We have the ability to deploy AI skills, general purpose skills, a lot of them curated within general robotics, so that you can go and deliver value now. And while doing so, you can think about this long-term robotic strategy that you need to do right now. There is no time to take individual solutions and then string them together, right? So basically, that's our prototypic engagement, where you work with these large industries. They are trying to make robotic automation reality right now with modern machine learning methods.
Awesome. Chi?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll give an example where the audience can probably relate the most. You probably have seen the Waymos that are driving around Mountain View or San Francisco. They're starting to pick people up from the airports now. So I'll give an example. When I was at Google, it took 14 years to get the Waymo from a lab to the streets and be able to pick up and cut, passenger and deliver that passenger safely to their destination. And during that process, I was actually one of the trusted testers at Google. They call it the dog fooding, where you can literally check out a Waymo car, but you would drive it. You would drive it to work. You would drive it to shopping, Costco, wherever you, and it would learn from the data of your driving, right? And basically, it collects all this data over time, and they had a bunch of these Waymos that were these trusted drivers to kind of see not just how their templated driving map worked, but also how real people drove, just to kind of see the difference. But they also started running simulations later on to get enough data so that it can launch. But 14 years is a long time. And with a lot of the progress of physical AI and a lot of what actually Ashish is actually developing with simulations, you can really shorten that from 14 years to 14 days, maybe even 14 minutes, right? And so a lot of this development is happening now. And there's good use cases that can apply to many applications there. One specific thing that CosmicBrain is doing, we actually have a early pilot with a laundromat company in San Francisco. You saw earlier Chelsea was presenting the physical intelligence models where they were folding laundry. Now, this laundromat is a small business, but they're pretty huge. They have a huge distribution of laundry services on the western part of the United States. Thousands of washers and dryers. And they want to start deploying robots to fold laundry. And so they actually used the generalist model that you saw earlier from physical intelligence, which does understand how to fold laundry. But it got stuck in various parts, like, in households, many here, if you do your laundry, it's not just t-shirts, jeans, and socks. It's, you're mixed up with your partner's laundry, your kid's laundry, different sizes, different colors, and there's patterns on those laundry, like even pictures of dogs or people or cartoons that could confuse some of these generalist models. And so what we're working on with the laundromat is basically training specifically the different varieties of objects, but also the different environments, the settings where the laundry is done. So like a lot of the lab work you see is, either white background or a certain kind of like, it's very plain. And so when it was trained on that plane. But in the actual facilities of laundromats, it doesn't look like that. And they have like 1,000 different facilities. So you have to start training real data customized to what they want to those needs.
It's interesting that you brought up Waymo, because a lot of people actually will compare robot to self-driving cars. And I think like one of the biggest challenges for the self-driving cars is they spend so much time than they expect to fix all the edge cases. So when I say edge cases, it means that, what does a Waymo do? What does a Waymo do? Like when the car, bump into a person who is dressing up like a plumber, or like, and wearing a costume, or like what does a Waymo do? Like when you encounter a stop that is covered by snow. So there are so many unpredictable situations out there in the real world that self-driving cars, robots, like they don't know like how to do when they encounter that. So like I'm also very curious about this. Like, do you think that in robot, like will we also like spend a lot of time fixing all these edge cases, or maybe it's a different story? Like, what do you guys think about this? What's your take on this?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that there's a concept called synthetic data in part of the pipeline of training. And so sometimes you don't have enough real data, and so you create synthetic versions of that. And you can run it multiple times so that it can understand it and learn from it. So most of the times you can actually create edge cases through synthetic data and simulate with that. But sometimes even the synthetic data is hallucinated. Like you're like, whoa, where does this Mario thing come from? And so in those situations, you need to also have some way or process where you do some quality filter of your training data set, just to make sure that you're training on good quality and not bad quality.
Yeah. So I'll answer this in 3 different levels. One on the operational side, engineering side, and then the research side. This is something that I've been thinking for over a decade. On the operational side, when you're flying on an airplane, it's a flying robot, right? Mostly you have pilots that are operators, and they are monitoring the system, right? And even in the self-driving, you see that analogy, right? A lot of car companies were actually teleoperating with certain, with certain oversight. The first wave of, mass deployment is actually that model, where you have some kind of a human oversight, and there are proper checks and balances, and maybe, as we get successful, it'll fan out. So one operator will be able to tackle multiple robots and so forth. And I think that's the operational progression, right? So we have to make sure that our deployment frameworks and tooling support that operationally. And I think it's a very pragmatic way to do it, and that's how I would go and deploy these robots on the factory floor right now. Instead of them being just, fully autonomous, you are actually watching them continuously. On the engineering side of things, it's a little bit more difficult problem. How do you go and build, safety into these robots and test for edge cases, validation? Some of the ideas that she's bringing up around synthetic data is very well into the thing. But I think, with the newer kind of AI models that are coming up, for instance, these foundation models that are generative models of robot action, for instance, interpretability and predictability of those models are going to be difficult. And, there are certain ideas that are being explored, but I would say it's a very difficult problem. Instead of generating, for instance, robot actions, maybe we should generate robot code, for instance. That's one example. And then you can actually go and do all kind of software validation on that code, right? I mean, there's Copilot and there are codecs and all those things. So there's one way to think about it. The other way to think about it is that now really start thinking about CI/CD, idea of CI/CD embedded with simulation. So before you go and execute an action, your robot is running hundreds of simulations beforehand, right? And so those are some of those ideas. Again, really nascent ideas. On the research side of things, people have been thinking about cyber-physical system safety for a long time. We have folks doing formal methods, for instance, but more increasingly, even empirical work. I do believe that, the idea of safety as an emergent property has not been thought very deeply into robotics yet. So I'll give you an example. Large language models, 10, 15 years ago, they would spit out these sentences which might not be grammatically correct. But now, you can write books and books, library worth of text, without making a single syntax error. That's the power of scale. Maybe, if your robots have seen enough data, the idea of safety emerges automatically from these models, right? So again, it's a very difficult problem, but the beauty of having a challenge is that you can tackle at the research level, at the engineering level, and at the operational level. But I am fairly confident that across these different levels, as we get more mind share, we will be able to solve this.
And there's another big question in robotics, it's touch. So as human, when we are holding this bottle, we know how much pressure we want to apply so this bottle wouldn't drop. And when you open a refrigerator, how much pressure, you know how to do it, right? But robot, they are trained by vision. So a lot of robots, they don't know how much pressure they should apply. So they won't drop a bottle and break something. So I think touch is a lot of people in robotics are talking about, and then we see a lot of companies are trying to crack this. So also I'm just curious about what's your take on this, and then are you thinking to deploy this in your system someday?
Yeah, for us, I'll go back to the laundry example. I do laundry a certain way, and when I'm at my mom's house, she does laundry a different way. So for me, I don't care if the laundry is dry or not. It's oh, this is good enough, I'm gonna take it out. But mom, and she's no, this is not dry, this is wet, right? So that's a sensor that on the hand robots, the tactile, you have to be able to, as like going back to the grandma test, there is expectations that robots deliver up to a certain quality. And so if your expectations are high, you have to have sensors that can give you those information and data so that you can act upon it. Yeah. So the answer is we have to be able to incorporate other sensory data. And it's not just the touch, but it's also the Superman senses, right? Superman can like see X-ray, right? Like he can see through things. But there's a lot of vision, not just the RGB, but the infrared, the ultraviolet, right? Those are information that can also help robots make decisions and act upon it. And not only that, but like LiDARs, sonars on robotic devices are also able to give super and basically sensory input for the robots to take those actions. Again, it depends on the application.
Yeah. So, skin is the largest organ in human body, right? So definitely the touch is so important for us while we manipulate all these physical objects. I see time's up, so I'll basically maybe take a minute. So in the realm of technology, dexterity and touch probably are some of the hardest yet to solve problem in robotics compared to, for instance, navigation and perception, right? So it's a very important problem. Not only we have to innovate in the sensor space, but also in the algorithmic space, because the amount of information that's coming out from touch is quite a bit. A lot of folks who are doing reinforcement learning with prior perception, for instance, it's kind of using those elements, but in a very limited sense. So between sensing, between algorithms, between ability to handle that data, a lot of innovation needs to happen. And if you guys, graduate students who are looking into it, dexterity is one of the biggest frontiers, and that's something that has yet to be solved.
Do we still have time for questions?
Yeah, we have 5 minutes for Q&A session.
Okay, but
Probably no follow-up question.
okay. Okay, but before we open up, I actually have one question because when we are talking about robotics, you cannot not talk about humanoid, right? So with humanoid, we are seeing every day on Twitter so many demos, like a humanoid, folding the clothes, open the door, clean the dishes for you. But actually, now what we have in our house is Roomba, the floor cleaning robot. So I feel still a long way to go to really have humanoid, to do all the kind of task in your house. So I'm just curious, what is the hardest part that is holding up humanoid right now? I mean, there's so much hype around it, but I'm just curious about what you guys think about this.
A Roomba with 2 arms is a humanoid. It can move, it can pick places. That's all you want your robot to do, right? Does it need to be on a bipedal? Maybe if you have stairs, right? So again, when you think about humanoid, one of the biggest problem is the full body control. Between the legs and the arms, pulling and pushing, those are some of the unsolved problems. But if you look at piecemeal, ability to navigate and ability to use both hands to pick and place things, I think, a lot of the problems in homes can be solved. And again, it's a spectrum, right? So, that's my take. I think, there are certain form factors that can be deployed now and can be useful. But for certain, full body motion control, like opening the doors and walking through it, squatting and opening the door, those are a little bit harder. But sure, we'll get there as a community.
Yeah, if you believe in the car manufacturers that are making robots or humanoid robots today, around the world, they say that people will buy 1 or 2 robots just like how you would buy 1 or 2 cars for your homes. If you believe that, then you would want to invest in humanoids, number 1. But also, there's a lot of problems that are challenges you need to solve before you get there. There's power. There's the type of battery you use. If there's no connection on the robot or humanoid, how does it understand to talk to the network that has the cloud information for it to do anything. The processor, like even the parts, the supply chain of humanoid is not at a certain place where it can be mass scaled right now. So there's all these issues. I think there's no one thing that is the bottleneck. I think there is a huge bottleneck in everything. And all I just mentioned was the technical bottlenecks, just the technology bottlenecks. We haven't even covered the cultural and the cultural aspects. So I think if I asked people in the audience here, would you invite a humanoid into your homes today? I think most of you probably would say no. And I actually did this survey yesterday at a different event. And most of it because culturally, we have been conditioned to think of robots or humanoids as Terminator or something of involving war, like Star Wars, War of the Clones, battling each other with swords and guns, right? So there's a negative perception of humanoids today, especially the forms that you see in media. It is literally a walking skeleton. So that's really scary. But in certain cultures, like in the East, in Japan, Taiwan, you grew up with Xiao Ding Dang, Doraemon. You grew up with Astro Boy, and not just the Transformers or the Gundams. So there is more of a different acceptance spectrum for certain demographics. And so the good thing is the culture is changing. And the young kids today, they're watching WALL-E, they're watching Baymax, they're watching Wild Robot. And so a lot of the depiction of the robots in media today is supportive. It's not violent, and it's not scary. And so I think this kind of coincides with Ed Chi's, thing about 6 years later, as these kids, graduate from college, start working at Google or wherever else, they will start bringing robots into their homes, right? And so I think it's kind of like the perfect storm of things.
Awesome. So I guess we are opening up for the Q&A. Okay. Any questions?
I got a question. This is Ed Chi from Google. So it's very clear that some of the autonomous robots are already working. So self-driving cars are getting to the point maybe it's almost profitable. In defense applications, drones, we have already seen that they are very profitable. What's your estimate that by what year? So the Bay Area plumber is somewhere between $100 to $300 an hour, depending on the complexity of the job, et cetera. What is your estimate? What year can I expect to call a Waymo that is going to deliver a plumber that will fix my faucet? What year would that be?
Very good question.
For a similar cost to whatever dollar that will be in that year.
I think Ed Chi is saying, hey, this is the next $1 million business idea. So I think people here should be excited about this opportunity because it's another way to create a physical AI application. You can actually train a physical form, could be a small robot that brings tools, that answers questions, that analyzes your plumbing, and tells you like, oh, this is the problem you're experiencing. Here are the tools that you need to fix it. Oh, is it too strong? Okay, I'll do it for you, right? So there's all these things that can happen, and it can actually happen in the next, I think, 3 to 5 years.
Well, I think instead of Waymo driving a plumber to your house, very likely you are looking at a contraption that you'll probably put under your sink or wherever you have plumbing problem, and it will have a couple of arms, and it'll go to town with it, right? Not necessarily the form factor where a humanoid shows up and can do it. I think the way we have Roomba that's dedicated towards it. You will have a device that's dedicated towards it, initially for most of those form factors. And then maybe later on, there might be a consolidation happening across all the use cases, but I do believe it'll be more skill specific. And I think if you think about it, I can think about building a company that just does it, right? There's a box, 2 arms, just put it under your sink, it'll do the needful.
And what year do you think that you can?
I think you can probably, raise money for it right now and start working on it, right? With the promise of delivering something in a couple of years.
Very good idea. If you are looking into building in this space, please come to talk to me afterward when we write check. Okay. Do we?
So actually, yeah, let's do one more.
Oh, let's
I just
do
checked
one
the staff.
more.
Yeah, we got time.
Okay. Anyone got question?
That's
one.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, thank you. So I have a question of how do you envision this robot to be deployed? Because I keep hearing about the importance of deployment. And do you envision to deploy in most industrial environment or a consumer electronics space? And also this deployment is, if it's in the industrial focused, then why do we need to do a generalized model for that? Because what I heard is all the tasks is kind of specialized. For example, plumber or some electricians, they're very specialized. My question is why do we keep discussing about how the importance of generalized robots?
Yeah, general purposeness. So again, think about if you're car manufacturing, you have 1,000 different parts that needs to be picked in place. I think if you have a general purpose pick and place model, that's way more preferable than you fine tuning for every single object use case, right? Same thing, plumbing case, different kind of pipes, different kind of sizes, different kind of environment. So there is a little bit of robustness you need with respect to the environments. And, a lot of foundation model for robotics work is top down, as in, it's throw every data point at it, all the videos in the world, all teleoperation, and we'll have a general purpose intelligence for robot. My take is more bottoms up, which is you will have a general purposeness across multiple skills, and then, this will consolidate over time. So more bottoms up versus top down, and bottoms up, you already have the need, right? I mean, we are seeing that across manufacturing sectors. When you have, for instance, Franca arms trying to be deployed in a factory that disassembles iPhone, you want that arm to do multiple things, to disassemble, to take certain chips out, to replace the screen, to clean it, and so forth.
So,
you don't want
how do you balance that between the cost versus because I imagine that's going to cost you more. And if you want to enter the consumer electronics, the cost is a top priority in the customers mind. I don't want to spend 20,000 or 40,000 to buy a robot that can do everything. Probably I just want to do some simple thing with some $100 robots.
Yeah, no, so here's the deal. I think the primary cost, right, will still be in hardware. If you look at self-driving, the software, the value that's accruing to software is 20% of the BOM, right? You buy a $50,000 Tesla and 10,000 spending on AI. That's likely going to be the same case as well. So the cost will not be because you have expensive AI models. The cost still will be the hardware and the infra. But in if you look at the accrual, right, very likely your robots will break even with a couple of, a year or two of deployment, because they can work 24/7, right? And it's as the dialogue in Signal is prevalent, software is going to eat labor. Again, depends upon how much you believe in it, but I think the economics are there, right? I mean, that's the reason everyone is rushing towards it.
Well, thank you again. Let's give another round of applause to the speakers.